How does the outside world view lacrosse? It's exclusive. It's expensive.
It wasn't always that way.
It's white.
It's not all white.
It's the boys' club.
Lacrosse is a sport for everyone.
Let me tell you our story, the story of the Haudenosaunee. That is our traditional name. Today, most people know us as the Iroquois. Lacrosse is the oldest team sport on our continent. The Haudenosaunee people were first given this game over 1,000 years ago as a gift from the Creator. It was given to us as a medicine game. A ceremonial game was called to heal the sick, make peace among nations, and to have fun. We had no referees. It was a ceremony game played with the wooden stick made from the hickory tree, representing all plant life. The net was made from the sinew of the deer, representing all animals. The wooden stick represented our connection to the natural world. This game connects us to the earth. A stick is put in our cradle board when we are born, and we are buried with our stick when we die. We will carry our stick into the next world to play with our ancestors who are waiting for us. When we play competitive lacrosse, we carry the values of the medicine game onto the field and into the box. We are the originators of this game. It is our way of life for our people. It is a great honor to be a lacrosse player. Many First Nations have many different names for the game. In Onondaga, we call it the Hunchitquaix, which means they bump hips. The name lacrosse came from across the waters. In the 1630s, the French missionaries coined the name lacrosse because they thought the stick looked like a crozier or cross the bishops carried. They also changed the Haudenosaunee name to the Iroquois, and the game began to take a new shape. First played outside the native reservations in Montreal, Canada. 200 years later, Canada actually declared lacrosse as its national sport, and in doing so, they distanced lacrosse from its native roots and intentions. It's like saying, for this to be ours, it's no longer yours. In our view, the game was a gift from our people to share with the world. To quote the great Oren Lyons, former All-American goalkeeper at Syracuse, Lacrosse Hall of Famer, Onondaga Faith Keeper, and global speaker, when you talk about lacrosse, you talk about the lifeblood of our Six Nations, the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora nations. The game is ingrained in our culture, our system, and our lives. Anthropologists come here and stay for a year and think they understand our life and our religion. If you can't understand the language, you'll never get it right. I've been here my whole life and I'm still learning. But when I die, I know I will be buried with my goalkeeper stick.
College lacrosse was born when Manhattan College and NYU played the first game in 1877, 22 years before the first ever college basketball game tip-off. Racial segregation in the United States made the inclusion of Black, Indigenous, and people of color almost non-existent in collegiate sports through the early 1900s and Jim Crow era. But the civil rights movement did bring change to the sports world. Texas Western won a national championship in basketball with an all-black starting lineup in 1966. The following year, Kentucky's Nate Northington became the first black football player in the SEC. And lacrosse had Jim Brown. Yes, that Jim Brown. In his memoir, legendary sports writer and Emmy Award-winning writer Dick Schaap recounts his days facing Brown while Schaap played goalie for Cornell. In the big game against Syracuse, I made 22 saves, 3 off Jim Brown. I never saw those 3 shots. They bounced off me. Brown took 4 other shots and scored 4 goals. Jim Brown was the best lacrosse player who ever lived. He played midfield, wielding a stick so short it bordered on illegal, and protecting that stick so fiercely with his forearm that double and even triple teams did not slow him down. His legs brought to mind telephone poles, but telephone poles never moved so swiftly. That was in 1957. 63 years later, Brown remains the only black male player in the National Lacrosse Hall of Fame. Like other collegiate sports, lacrosse slowly became more diverse in the 1960s. And that brings us to Morgan State College. Dr. Miles Harrison Jr., my father, was an attackman on the 10 Bears. Though I fear the 10 Bears of Morgan State College have become part of lacrosse's forgotten lore, Morgan State was the first historically black college to field an NCAA lacrosse team. And until recently, they were the only historically black college or university in men's lacrosse. From 1970 to 1975, the 10 Bears were a perennial top 25 team. Morgan State beat Harvard, Notre Dame, and upset the number one team in the country at the time, Washington and Lee University. But as the 80s dawned, the Bears went into hibernation. Morgan State shuttered its lacrosse program in 1981 due to financial hardship. The 10 Bears became a distant echo. In the modern age of lacrosse, grow the game has become a popular rallying cry. The sport has seen its geographical footprint expand considerably, from hotbeds in Dallas to Denver, the Bay Area of San Francisco, and the Pacific Northwest. Well-known and established equipment and apparel companies have invested. Though demographic expansion has been slow, the access is limited. It's expensive to play, as are other sports like hockey and golf. Games that require equipment and contact insurance present high barriers for participation. Think about football. Though football, on the other hand, began subsidizing the cost of equipment and insurance at the youth and rec level decades ago, relying on taxpayer dollars to fund participation. And as a result, football enjoyed unrivaled popularity and a wide range of demographic participation. Perhaps growing the game requires us to return to our traditional roots, as well as to think critically about access and funding. While the faces of the game remain largely unchanged, players of color have made their mark in recent years. Damian Davis and John Christmas won national championships at Princeton and Virginia. In 2005, while surrounded by tremendous teammates and coaches at Johns Hopkins University, I was fortunate enough to become the first black player to win the Tewaaraton Award. Most recently, Albany's Lyle Thompson and Miles Thompson smashed Division I records, winning numerous accolades and inspiring a generation, all while proudly championing their Haudenosaunee heritage. Trevor Baptiste turned into the greatest face-off artist the game has ever seen, while Miles Jones inspired Jim Brown comparisons, and in turn inspired others to follow in his footsteps. In 2016, Hampton University launched a Division I men's program. The Pirates became the first HBCU since Morgan State College to field an NCAA men's lacrosse team.
So what's the future for lacrosse?
It is my family's and my people's hope that lacrosse will be welcomed by everyone, that the game will be played with honor. We hope that lacrosse will bring a world community based on true friendship, respect, and peace. We hope that lacrosse and the Iroquois Nationals will be at the Olympics in 2028.
We have to own the past, learn from it, impact the present, and change the future.
We have to speak up, be allies, be advocates, and we need to grow the women's game.
We have to be fearless. We need to stand together to create change, to fight against social injustice, and build a more inclusive community that empowers players.
We have to be a sport that represents the direction of where our world is moving. We have to be the sport of the future.